Hello everybody and welcome to Morzak EV, a channel dedicated to all things electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging and all related technologies. So, what's it like to do a road trip in an electric vehicle? Well, early this year we did a 600-mile round trip including visits to south of London and the Isle of Wight. And I thought it'd be really interesting to see how we charge the vehicle at different times and then compare the costs of running our electric vehicle on this road trip compared with our previous car, which was a Ford Focus petrol. So we started out at our home near Telford. Then we headed down to Surrey, just south of London. Headed across to Farnborough to the Fully Charged show. Then down to Southampton for one night before getting the ferry across to the Isle of Wight for a few days. And then heading back up to Banbury before going back home. So with a couple of detours and sightseeing, the trip was pretty close to 600 miles. So a couple of things worth noting. Firstly, we stayed at 6 different hotels during this road trip. However, only one had an EV charger. It does make it more simple if you stay at hotels that do have EV chargers, and this is getting a lot more popular. Secondly, we did go in our Tesla Model 3, and this really does make things easier than some other EVs due to the supercharger network in the UK being available to only Teslas. So we had the choice of Tesla chargers and non-Tesla chargers. Finally, when doing this trip, we did plan ahead a little, as much as you would do doing any road trip. We didn't pin down exactly every stop and every charge we were going to do, just looked on the route, picked out a couple of chargers, and mostly did it as we went along. One of the things we're always keen not to do is letting owning an EV get in the way of your holiday. It should be as easy to own as a petrol vehicle, and I think you'll see it is. Finally, at the end, we'll go over some costs and you can see what the cost difference is between running an EV on a long road trip and charging away from home compared with a petrol vehicle. But before we get into the detail, don't forget to like the video with a cheeky thumbs up, subscribe and hit the bell icon for notifications of future videos on Teslas, EVs, EV charging and all related tech. If you're thinking of changing energy suppliers, make sure you check out our Octopus referral code to get £50 credit on your Octopus account when you sign up, and check out our other social media channels. So the first leg of the trip was from Telford to Surrey. We stayed in the beautiful area of the Surrey Hills and went to see some sights. And on that first leg, we stopped at a supercharger at Heathrow Airport. Now this whole experience was a bit weird because we couldn't get out the car because the hotel is currently a quarantine hotel. So that was a bit strange, but obviously owning a Tesla Model 3, you get all the benefits of things such as Netflix, YouTube, and we were watching the aeroplanes fly overhead. Supercharged number 1! This was just a quick blast to get us onto the Surrey Hills. We didn't really need to stop, but we thought it'd be worthwhile topping up while we had a quick break, and then we knew we had additional charge for the next day if needed. And as it turned out, there wasn't anywhere for us to plug in our 3-pin charger overnight at the hotel, so we were all good. This is the first hotel stop. Great views. And the chairs in this garden are really handy. The next leg of the trip was from the Surrey Hills to Farnborough. This was to see the Fully Charged show, and we knew the hotel we were staying at did have a destination charger of 22 kilowatt. The Tesla charges its 11 kilowatt on a 22 kilowatt charger, so we thought we'd get a good charge before moving on to our next stop. The only problem we didn't consider was the fact that because it was a fully charged weekend, there were tons of EVs and a big queue for the destination charger at the hotel. Luckily, we just waited our turn and managed to grab a spot and charge for about 4 hours before moving the car and letting somebody else have a go. The next day, we walked to Fully Charged Live 2021, and you can check out the video on the show by clicking the card above or in the links below. It was a great day, and once we were done there, we moved on to our next destination, which was a pub halfway between Farnborough and Southampton. It was a lovely little pub, and there was a music festival on there, so we had a great night. Again, there were no charging facilities there, but it didn't really matter. We still had plenty left on the vehicle, and the plan was to charge in the city of Southampton. The next morning, we got to Southampton a little early to check in the hotel, so we stayed at a public car park. Now, this multi-storey car park was in the city centre, near all the shops, and it had charging facilities, which were free. Free electricity. Now, a lot of the time, we were only getting about 16 amps, or about 3.5 kilowatts, but all we had to do was pay for our parking and then charge for free. And as it turned out, when we came to pay for the parking, the car park had decided to boost local revenues that they would give free parking on weekends. So we got free parking and free charging for about 6 hours. Brilliant. 16 amps, it's 3.5 kilowatts. So the plan was to stay in Southampton for a night before moving on to the Isle of Wight. Again, there were no charging facilities at this hotel, but we were fairly confident as we were topped up from our stay at the multi-storey car park. Well, how about that, Mrs. Octopus? Free parking and free electricity. The next day, we got the ferry into the Isle of Wight. We had a couple of stays at different hotels, none of which had charging facilities, and we did the sights on the island. Now, this was the only time that we found any sort of difficulty in charging. I won't go into the detail here because we've got a separate video on our difficulties in the Isle of Wight, which you can check out by clicking the card above. But eventually, we did get a charge before leaving back for Southampton. The last leg of the trip was to drive from Southampton to home, but we had to make a quick stop to see a customer in Banbury. So we made a quick stop, performed the survey for the new commercial customer, and then had a quick lunch break at the Banbury superchargers. This was just to add enough charge to get us back home. Finally, the last trip home was a breeze. And getting home, we could top up the car again using our Zappy charger and our solar panels. So, what are the costs for running an EV on a trip like this? Well, we started out with a full battery. You can see here we got supercharger stops and destination charger stops, and the couple of stops that we did at the Isle of Wight, and I've broken this down into actual costs and then possible costs had there not been free. So all our supercharger stops were free because at the time Tesla was running the referral program and we still had free supercharger miles. However, in the possible costs, I've costed these up at what they would have cost had we not had free supercharger miles. I've costed our home up. Again, that was free because at the time we were getting free charging from the sun. However, I've costed it up at our current rate of 15.6 pence as well, so you can see what the possible cost of this was. Finally, any of the other stops that we did, I've assumed an average of 35 pence per kilowatt hour. Now, if you're shrewd, there are always free destination charges around, but for fairness and balance, I've costed these up as if they weren't free, as this may not always be the case. So, what did the trip actually cost us? So the only charging stop that actually cost us any money was the one at someone's house. And this was more me giving somebody some money to say, thanks for letting us charge at your house and thanks for picking us up and dropping us off from the hotel, as it was raining at the time. So, the 600 mile actually cost us £15, which works out to about 3 pence per mile. If we'd have had to pay for all our stops, this would have cost us around £46, or around 8 pence per mile. So what would this have cost us in our previous vehicle? Well, we had a petrol Ford Focus ST. Now, I know this isn't exactly what you call an economical vehicle, but we used to get 32 miles per gallon on long trips like this if we drove it steady. On top of this car was not as fast as our Tesla Model 3. It had about half the brake horsepower, it was front wheel drive, so it also didn't have the same amount of traction, and it definitely wasn't as smooth to drive. Well, 32 miles per gallon at a cost of around £1.42, which it was at the time, per litre of petrol, at 628 miles, comes to around £126.69. That's an equivalent cost of around 21 pence per mile. So this road trip saved us around £111 in reality, and even if we'd have had to pay for all our charging stops, we'd have still saved almost £81. So I think you can see that's pretty significant savings moving from a petrol vehicle to an EV. Also, none of this takes into account the fact that our EV does not require any servicing. We used to have to get our Ford Focus serviced every year. Now I can picture the comments now. I know this isn't the full picture because there's costs of ownership and they're two totally different cars. You can't really compare one with the other. There was a good reason for us swapping to the EV due to our business and our working lives. But I think this does show that there are huge cost savings to be had from moving from a petrol vehicle to an electric vehicle. So I hope this was useful. If it was, give us a cheeky thumbs up on that like button. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for notifications of future videos. Make sure you check us out on our social media. Don't forget our octopus referral code. Free electricity. And thanks very much for watching.